So calls to order at 6:02. The first thing we'll do is the clerk's report. We have approval of minutes for May 20th and May 26th, 2020, and the warrants of consent agenda warrants of May 4th, May 11th, May 18th, May 26th, and payrolls for May 8th and May 22nd, 2020. Oh, could I have a motion to approve the consent agenda, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Sean. Second.
Second, Emilie.
Thank you, Emily. Moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda, the clerk's report, minutes of May 20th, May 26th, and 4 sets of warrants and 2 payrolls. All those in favor, please unmute and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the consent agenda is approved. We have recognition of visitors. We're going to hold the public comment and non-agenda items until the end. So I'm not sure, Lyle, do we have any visitors today that presenting or anything?
No, we will next week, but not
Yeah,
today.
next week we have the middle school leadership people coming?
Correct, yes.
Great, okay, good. So we're all set with that. We've had a number of communications this week. I think that most of them we're responding to individually. I'm not sure there's anything that we need to take up with the whole board. Just checking, Lyle, and any of those. I've been writing back and you've been writing back and
Correct, yes.
forwarding them to Steve in some cases. So
Yes.
I think we're all set for
Yes.
communications.
Mhm.
And just want to remind people, on the bottom of your screen, there's a little thing that says participants. And if you click on that, you get a column that opens up on the right, and down at the bottom, there's a little blue hand. So if you wish to speak, if you click on that, then I know you wish to speak. Right now I can see myself, Lyle, Wendy, Sean, Ann Beekman's name, and Emily's picture. And the rest of the other 24 participants are not, I can't see you. So the only way I can recognize you is if you raise your blue hand. We will have a guest tonight. Emilie Kornheiser is going to come in around 6:30 and tell us about, I believe there was action in the House today. I haven't checked to see, to approve the yield and set the tax rate. And this has been percolating for a long time. It really wasn't ever in question, but they finally have taken that action, which will enable us to put all the rumors about massive property tax increases to rest. Hopefully, well, actually, the rumors might persist, but we'll know at least that the legislature has acted. And she may have some other updates for us as well. And I've invited other legislators to come, and I heard from Molly Burke and Sarah Coffey that they would not be able to join us. I haven't heard from the representatives from the other towns, so people who from Dummerston and Putney who want to make sure that they're well represented, I encourage you to have your legislators join us. The only other bit of housekeeping stuff is, Thomas, I wanted to ask if you would record, when we do motions, if you would record them and then read them back to us. I sometimes forget to do that, and we forgot that last time. And actually, we and sort of had to change it on the fly based on minutes or notes because we didn't have a video of that meeting, which reminds me, I need to record this one. And so, Thomas, if you could do that, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, so just anytime we're going to do a meeting, I'll write it down. I'll write it down in the email that I send to Wendy.
Perfect, yeah. And then, and before we vote, if I forget, Wendy and Thomas, would you remind me to read the motion back before we vote? Because
Sure.
we do tend to make them up by committee and then approve them without ever really finalizing the language. So,
Okay. Wendy, that will be in the email with the attendees list, okay?
right. And for a while, I was trying to have all the motions written down before the meeting, but it doesn't always work that way. So, okay, so we're on to committee reports. Finance Committee, Sean, I don't know if you met, but you probably have some reports.
Yeah, the Finance Committee did not meet, but I did send a email around requesting that if anybody had any questions on the warrants of payroll, submit it to me and I would get it to to Frank. And so
Great.
got a couple of questions. I had actually 4 that came through that I just submitted today. So it'll be nice to get back to a regular Finance Committee meetings.
Yeah.
It seems to work. Thank you.
Thank you. Personnel Committee meets Friday, so I'm assuming there's nothing today to report. Policy and Amendment Committee also, I know, hasn't met. We do have 2 policies that we need to work on. I think maybe wait till the summer and until the vote is over to get to that. Anne, is there anything? Do you have anything that is pressing or from the committee to report?
I do not, and I'm agreeing that I've been setting it back so we could get through what we're getting through now, and we're almost there.
Okay. Let's see. Emilie, the Policy and Amendment Committee, we met again.
Yep, the PPC met last Wednesday, and mainly what we went over was we had kind of a packed agenda, so we didn't get through our whole agenda, but we did get to hear from Chris Sawyer and Steve Perrin about their report into equity and sports. And mainly what we're doing is the committee was tasked with reviewing the report and then coming with questions that we had sent in a little bit earlier and hearing about like the data or different points that we wanted to hear about. So we had time to go through all of our questions, but didn't have time as a committee to sit down and then, hash through things or think about recommendations or anything like that. So on our next agenda is to actually hash through that, and additionally to recircle back to the after school conversation and kind of any follow-ups or loose ends and some questions the community had just raised, raising them to the committee and figuring out what we're doing.
Thank you. Let's see. Thomas, the Climate Crisis Task Force, I believe you had a meeting, but it may have been between or before
It was before our last
Yes,
meeting. You
yep.
should have our next one, not next week, the week after, in the middle of the month. And that'll be the same story for the Diversity Committee.
Great, okay. And the Communications Council, I think Jamie got a communication that came today. I think she got a communication out, and Barb as well, about the voting. It was sort of the first informational thing that we're putting out that was actually sent around by the West Brattleboro Association, and it was so thorough and so well done. I just sent it on to them to get that out. So the Communications Council is underway. Diversity and Equity, you mentioned, Thomas. The SU board meets Friday. Carrie, any heads up or highlights you want to give us? What we can look forward to for the SU board on Friday?
I think it's going to be a quick one. I think we're just trying to focus on getting some little housekeeping stuff done. I think we will have to have a longer one because I think an outstanding item is that continuous improvement plan.
Mm-hmm.
So if people haven't had a chance to look at that, I would recommend you try to dig into it. But other than that, I think it's going to be a fast one.
Yeah, that's great. I'm glad you're following up on that because I have not looked at it since we had the improvement plans were presented. I haven't looked at them, so I'm glad we're going to follow up on that.
I'll send a tickler out to everybody on that.
Okay. The next thing is Leadership Council reports, and I see that Emilie Kornheiser, the Brattleboro representative, is here. So before we go into the Leadership Council reports, I'd like to invite Emilie to give us an update from the hijinks at the legislature.
Oh, it really feels like hijinks lately. Thanks for that intro and for the prompt moment. I'm sorry to interrupt the agenda here. Appreciate the time. So few things happened and a few more things are happening. Want to really appreciate the hard work to get the vote moving. And I'm sorry that we couldn't find a fix before that had to happen. Very hopeful. And I know that I've been talking a lot to Essex folks, I believe, Essex South Burlington, about their vote going forward. And it seems like it's going really well. So the yield bill was passed out of the House today. and want folks to understand that that meant that we were very clear that we were not making up for the shortfall in the ed fund with property taxes, nor do we have an intention of cutting costs as a way of filling the hole in the ed fund. So continuing to be really clear that we're interested in investing in our schools and our education, and we're not interested in doing that right now through property taxes. And so the piece of the property taxes, and I'm not going to get into the formulas and Brattleboro's formulas because then we'll be here for the rest of our lives. But we have set the rates at what they were expected to be in February when budgets were estimated. And so really saying that, you know, any growth, sort of natural growth from health insurance and et cetera year to year is very normal. And any challenges that we have with raising funds due to COVID should not be part of the yield bill. So that's something that definitely happened. Here are some things that are likely happening and in the mix that I wanted to give people an update on, knowing that everything can change and what happens in the House is not necessarily what happens in the Senate, and then who knows what happens when it gets to the governor, and my committee is just my committee, and everything might change next hour lately. But the Appropriations Committee is only setting up a first quarter budget, and that's happening in both of the House and the Senate because we don't have enough information about revenues in order to really figure out a whole year. And what that means, or really enough information about needs to do that either. And so what that means for just sort of the regular normal administration of state government and state government agencies is for the first quarter, they're getting their first quarter's budget. And the budget just looks like a quarter of that budget. And in some cases, with agencies that do a lot more of their work in the summer, they're not doing that 25%. They're say doing 40% or 50%, like the Agency of Natural Resources, for instance, that does a lot of things outside in the summer. There was originally a proposal to do that same thing with schools and the Ed Fund, and that the Ed Fund would just have sort of its first quarter dispersed, which everyone felt like everyone in my committee that it came to felt like it sent exactly the wrong message to our communities and to our schools about when you all really desperately need even the smallest grasp of stability that you can get. And so we've had some conversations with appropriations, and right now it looks like that first quarter budget being just a first quarter of funding is not going to be what happens with the Ed Fund. The Ed Fund will just have its full 100% disbursement the way it does normally. So that feels hopeful and exciting. As for ideas around the whole shortfall, I wish I could find a nicer word to talk about that, that we have in the Ed Fund still. There are various proposals on the table. We're in really close contact with the federal delegation around the CRF funds and how they can be used. And the guidance changes almost every day. And the guidance from the Treasury is different than the guidance from the delegation. And so there's a lot of back and forth. And so as we appropriate some of that funding for various very sort of likely and known streams that are approved, like healthcare, for instance, related to COVID, we are holding some of that CRF funding fenced off to in case guidance changes, and we can use that money to easily fill the shortfall in the Ed Fund. Does that make sense? I've been talking into boxes all day, so if you're following me, please nod. Thank you. Okay, appreciate it. And so we're just going to hold on to that. If it turns out that we're like 2 months down the line when we go, because we're operating now through the month of June, and then we're going to take July off, and then we're going to go back in August to fix the things that we don't know about the budget. And so in August, if it turns out from the guidance that that money can't be used for a revenue shortfall still, then we'll find a different way to deal with the shortfall, but we're going to sort of hold that money for that until then. If that doesn't work, we're looking at borrowing, we're looking at different sources of revenue, sort of everything's on the table in terms of how to raise those funds. I have not heard anything on the table about really cutting costs. from the legislature, that is. The last thing that I wanted to hit on is other money going to schools and communities related to children and families, and sort of how that works. We're having conversations as a county delegation about school food and the school food program and the summer school food program and how that all works and how to sustain the really incredible work that our district has done with busing meals to kids, and ways we can make sure that we're using the CRF funds to do that statewide for the summer, knowing that it'll be more expensive because we're going to have to add the busing funds, et cetera. And so advocating to use some of the CRF funds for that. And then there's a bunch of other places, you know, children's mental health, and I'm sure you all have a list of the human needs and the children and teachers' needs and the school needs related to that funds. That's all happening this week and next in the House, and then it will go over to the Senate. And basically, every committee is just fighting over their particular purview and pot of money. And so the issues that you'd be probably particularly concerned about are being fought over in the Education Committee at the end of this week and early next, and in the Human Services Committee. The food issue is mostly in Human Services, but is a little bit in the school, Ed Committee. And then it'll go over to the Senate to be fought about there. Things are moving really, really fast. And to be perfectly frank, the way information usually flows in the State House for us to understand and keep an eye on, say, like, you know, the advice of Hunger Free Vermont, which is who's advocating for, you know, school meals through the summer, and the advice of, you know, the Superintendent's Association and all of that. For legislators to track all of that, so much of that information flow is really dependent on how we operate within the physical building of the State House, and is really, really difficult now. So if you have a particular area that you feel like has just like disappeared off of the conversation that you're aware of, tell someone, please. It's like, there's too much going on and not enough information flowing right now as we're working virtually. So don't assume that myself or other legislators necessarily have our eye on every piece, especially if something's not in our own committee. It's really hard to know what's going on there. On that sour note, I will stop talking.
Actually, that's not sour at all. That's very, very helpful. One of the things that we have been talking about a lot is the broadband connectivity and the inequities around that. I'm assuming that's the Energy and Technology Committees?
That is one of the things that actually feels the most clear on its movement forward right now.
Oh, good.
So
I hadn't heard a thing.
It's very nice. So we're being very careful about how we're working on a bill right now about school construction, and we're being really, really careful that we make space in every piece of legislation that any connectivity piece can be folded into enabling legislation across a number of committees. And so the education committees are looking at that because that might be a really likely place to be justifying the use of CRF funds for connectivity, would be through schools. Yeah. And so the education committee is looking at, but most of the work is being done in energy and technology. And I know Representative Sibilia is feeling incredibly hopeful about finally getting it done. And I've heard that from Senator Ballant as well.
Great. I see Frank and Tim have their hands up, and Ann's was up at one point. So Ann, if you wanted to speak, please put your hand up again. Frank?
Hi, Emily. Thanks for the update. Quick question on there's two categories of CARES Act funding that we're aware of. One is the 1.25 billion that's coming to Vermont, and then there's the approximately 30 million specifically for public education. When you're referring to the hold and let's wait for further guidance, are you talking about both of those funds, or is it just one or the other?
So the smaller pot of money that's specifically for schools is much, much, much more flexible than the money that is the much larger pot of money, which has to be very, very, very narrowly tied to COVID issues. And so we are holding on to both of them for a short time to see how we can put them together into a puzzle piece. And I know that's difficult because you all need immediate relief to get some stuff done for planning for the fall. But for the things that you're doing for planning and immediate COVID relief would be better to come out of that larger pot of money than that smaller pot of money that is specifically designated for that issue, even though that actually doesn't make any sense when I say it like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I'm sure you're aware that, just in 2 weeks, June 22nd is when the summer food service program starts. So we need to start hiring people, today and getting them trained. Of course, we can't do that in the absence of funding. So you can see that our decisions have to be either to shut down these programs within, a week, or move forward based on, the results of your committee's work. So I'm sure you've heard the urgency and the time sensitivity of this. That's just one example of many programs, that we need to either decide to move forward or not.
I am very aware of that. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Frank. Ann Beekman?
Just a quick question. Representative Kornheiser, the number that was on page 959 when I read it for the yield was 10,998. Is that correct, or do you not have that in your head? That's fine.
I'm sorry, I don't have that in my head right now. What I have in my head right now is Abenaki hunting and fishing rights numbers and how much that will cost the Department of Wildlife.
Let's put it this way. You didn't change it from the text that I read, did you?
I doubt it. When did you? We haven't changed it for about a week.
Okay.
So no.
Because the old yield was 10,883. So if this passes the Senate, it should result in at least some of our towns seeing less of a property increase than our budget proposed when we had it back in March.
Yes, some towns will see less of an increase than you saw in March, is my understanding. This is slightly, the one that we passed was the, and sorry, I joined Ways and Means late in the session, and so what happened between January and March is not as clear to me as it should be. But there was a proposal in January that I think most of you base your budgets on, and then there was a second one when budgets came in February that went down. And it's that later one that we base things on. I can pull up the numbers and follow up with you later if you want, Anne. And please feel free to call me Emilie.
Thank you. I think that the numbers I have are right. I just wanted to point out to the board that would mean somewhere in the neighborhood of a 2-cent less increase than what we have posted on the internet right now as what we're proposing, if it passes the Senate as well.
And we can find out when the estimated date would be for when it might get out of the Senate, if that would be helpful for updating websites and such. I can find that out for you.
That would be helpful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Ann. Tim Maciel?
Hi, Emily.
Hi.
Frank asked my question about the CARES Act. I like what you said about the yield bill. My question is about process. I don't know how it works. Do you informally discuss legislation with the Senate, so there's a realistic possibility that the Senate and the House will agree? How does that work?
That's a fun question. So under normal circumstances, there are both formal and informal conversations. In this particular time while working virtually, and things are very much more complicated logistically all the time, there's a lot better and more formal coordination around really not picking up bills that wouldn't be able to get through both bodies because we have such limited resources to be working with. And then as a Windham County delegation, we meet either weekly or bi-weekly House members and senators, which is my understanding is actually fairly rare around the state that there's that level of coordination between the House and the Senate around issues that are of interest to the community. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. But are you optimistic about the Senate agreeing with your proposals for like 100% ed funding and all?
I am optimistic about those particular things because those go through Senate Finance. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Tim. Frank, I think you have your hand up again.
Yeah, I
Okay.
just wanted to follow up on Ann's point. It was, very, very good in that, if we were looking at our annual report, and we know we're going to refer a lot to that as we get into budget information hearings, Ann is making, a really good point that when we look at the tax impact associated with that yield number that Ann raised the question about, it would change our tax increase. Right now, it's estimated at 1.8% increase. And if the yield is what Ann mentioned, the 10,998, then our tax increase would be less than 1%. So just wanted to kind of reinforce the significance of that for the board, as we talk about budget impact on our June 30 vote.
Thanks, Frank. That's really excellent point. The nice thing about having that yield set is we now know what those numbers actually are. Thank you. Any other questions for Emilie? I don't see any. Emilie, thank you for demystifying things a little bit and explaining some of the processes and things that we wouldn't otherwise know about, like the difficulty of communicating with various information providers when you're not in the same building with them, and just the nature of the challenge. It seems great because everything's on TV and I can watch it all, but doing it, I think, is a lot harder. So,
and
thanks.
I actually have really been enjoying watching other committees on TV because I don't have a chance to do that normally because I would have to be in 2 rooms at once.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's a pretty fun opportunity to get an eye on the process. And I'm very happy to be here and sorry to not be able to stay for the rest of the meeting.
Yeah, you're going to miss the leadership
All
councils.
we do.
Great, thank you.
Bye.
Okay, so we'll move on to the Leadership Council reports. First thing, we have an appointment to the Putney Leadership Council. Ann, would you, or no, Liz, I guess, would be the person to do that. Would you nominate the new member for the Leadership Council, please, for Putney?
I don't know who it is.
Oh, then I guess it is Ann.
Sorry, no one's brought it to me either.
It's Marissa.
Oh, okay. That's fine.
Okay, go
I
ahead.
nominate Marissa to be on the Putney Leadership Council.
Great, thank you. Right, she's the school counselor, right?
Right,
Yeah, and she's been on for a while, just not formally a member.
right.
Yeah, great. So now we will formally appoint. And her last name?
Lazarus?
Yes, thank you. Marissa Lazarus. Okay.
Lazarus Minor.
Okay. I knew there was, yeah, thank you. So could I have a motion to nominate, to accept Marissa Lazarus Minor's appointment to the Putney Leadership Council, Putney Central Leadership Council?
So moved.
Thank you, Ann. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Liz. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please unmute and signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, Marissa is appointed. Okay, anybody want to start the leadership councils that met in the past week?
Should I also, this is Emilie, I think there's 2 people for the Academy School Leadership Council who haven't been nominated. Is now the time?
That would be great, yes.
Okay, we're unsure actually if we nominated them before, so but we will have a meeting tomorrow, so it's probably good to get them on. Their names are Mary Beth Porter, or I move that Mary Beth Porter and Rachel Glickman be nominated for the Academy School Leadership Council.
May I have a second, please?
Second.
Oh, thanks, Michelle. So moved and seconded to nominations for the Academy Leadership Council. All those in favor, please unmute and signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Could I just get that name again for the minutes?
Yes.
Yep. Mary Beth Porter and Rachel Glickman. I can type them to you too if you need it.
That's okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Great.
Oh, I'm sorry. And what school was that? One more time.
Academy.
Academy. Thank you.
Okay. So I think, Sean, I know you folks met, so why don't we start with you instead of making people figure out who should go first. We'll put together an order for this at some point when we get a little bit more established. for now, you want to give us a report on the, we know you meet every week, so you're going to have lots to say, I'm sure. You'll have to unmute, Sean.
Sorry.
Okay, great. Oh, I think you muted again. Good, that's good. You got it.
Yeah. All right, sorry. The Guilford Leadership Council met on Friday, May 29th at 1 o'clock. And there were 12 individuals at the meeting. And there was a lot of discussion, some directed from John Gagnon and the administration about hiring positions and interview positions and some other positions within the school itself. And then there was quite a bit of discussion on the upcoming budget vote and the implications surrounding that. And Beth Bristol actually forwarded an email to me from the Leadership Council, which I then forwarded to David, so I assumed everybody has seen that, which sort of highlighted the Guilford Leadership Council concerns. And so I hope everybody got that and were able to look it over. So it was a really good meeting, and once again, we'll meet this Friday, June 5th at 1 o'clock. So thank you very much. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to entertain those.
Any questions for Sean? Did any other councils meet between our last meeting and this one? Yeah, Michelle?
Okay. Dummerston has met. They met last Thursday. They've been meeting every other Thursday. We had a chance to go over, sort of the meeting expectations and clarify minutes being posted for the public. So they should be on that from here on out. Nice group of people. The main conversation they're having is actually, I'm really impressed. They're talking about the outdoor education at Dummerston. And so I don't know if everyone's familiar with the school, but Dummerston's kind of lacking in the area of a playground and facilities for the kids. We saw at the last board meeting with the report from the Programmatic and Equity Committee that Dummerston has the lowest budget for extracurricular activities. They spend the least amount of money per student. It was like $45 per student or something. So anyway, this group has been brainstorming about how to bring resources to our kids, especially with social distancing in mind and things like that. And so the school has a lot of land around it. It's owned by the town, but the school is leasing it exclusively. And so they're in the process of plotting out bike trails that would run along the side of this land. And a lower trail would be handicap friendly, so it'd be something that would be available for the community. They've met with the Conservation Commission to make sure it's environmentally intact. They've met with the select board already to get the thumbs up from the town to be able to move forward. And somewhere between last week and now, they were meeting with a trailblazer, for lack of a better term. I don't know if that's what they're called. Somebody who has a lot of experience in making trails and has done a really good job at some places like behind the Wyatt-Keene and stuff like that. And he was going to be plotting it out. And it's something that's really budget friendly. They think that they can get volunteers from the community to help with excavation and parent volunteers. The parents have been working hard to fundraise for a long time for the playground anyway. And it's potentially could be done for as little as $400 or $500 if we get enough sweat equity. So really impressed that they've just been working hard on this, and they're all really excited and ready to dive into making trails on the school's grounds. We talked about the budget a little bit too, talked about the vote. They understand, and the need to reach out to our families and be communicating how important it is that people show up to support our schools. We talked about, I'd reached out to our town clerk, and so we also just talked about recruiting younger poll workers that aren't in a high risk category to be able to assist in that. And something that maybe other leadership councils or we or as a board want to promote to get some new volunteers for the polls. But that's about it. That's about it.
That's quite a bit. Thank you. That's terrific. There were a number of weeks we didn't realize Dummerston had been functioning, obviously functioning at a pretty high level.
Yeah.
Thank you. Tim, I think you have a report for us.
Yes, we met last night. Oak Grove,
great, thanks.
Leadership Council for Oak Grove had its first meeting. It was a very good meeting, led by Mary Kaufman. And at first we talked about procedural matters, since it was the very first meeting. And then we got into the budget and how to encourage people to vote, and some concerns that the public might have, such as would the budget benefit Brattleboro more than the other towns, that type of thing. There's some very good ideas about encouraging people to vote by putting up a Facebook page for the PTO, Oak Grove PTO, and the Oak Grove Facebook page itself. Going on the radio. Personally, I think that Mary would do a great job on WTSA, possibly. And, putting advertisements in Commons. I think we're going to get into this when we talk about the budget and the Communications Council.
Yes, we will.
But one question I have that I couldn't answer, when we talk about the budget, can we encourage people to vote for it, or do we have to limit it to just voting?
That's actually the first thing we'll take up when we get to talk about the vote. Yeah, there's really clear language in the statute, and it's actually fairly broad. So we'll talk about that explicitly.
Okay, but I'm very glad to be part of the Oak Grove Leadership Council. It was a good meeting.
Thank you, Tim. Any questions for Tim? Jackie?
It wasn't a question, it was just to comment about Green Street.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, they did meet, but I did not make the meeting, so I was gonna ask Mark if he could report.
That would be great. Mark, can you give us a little update?
Sure. Yeah, it was a really good meeting. We talked a bit about how we've been working to maintain our school traditions while we're doing at-home learning. So for example, we pulled off the Tulip Trot this year virtually. We're still going to do our school musical, our end of the year extravaganza, and then some details around 6th grade graduation. The parents really had a lot of questions about how staff was doing and how morale was. So it was a very emotional meeting, actually. A lot of appreciation poured on the staff from the parents, which was great. So they're going to be working on some way to formally acknowledge the work that teachers have done during at-home learning. So that was really nice to hear. And then, of course, the budget was a huge discussion. And the consensus is we need to pass this budget. Our kids need it more than ever. So they've asked me to record like a 30-second opinion piece on why it's important to share with the school community. They felt like that would be an important action step. So I'll do that. And then they're gonna work on reach out with other families. So those were the takeaways.
Great, thank you. You're already ahead of us on the get out the vote efforts. Kelly.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask for Steve Perrin to speak about the Leadership Council meeting at the high school that was held last week, because I unfortunately was not able to attend. And I believe that he also had some people to be nominated to the Leadership Council for the high school.
Thanks, Kelly. Steve, can you bring us up to speed?
Sure. So we met on May 27th, and we had a very robust group of parents and staff. And I guess I should start off with the nominations. I believe our slate of parents was previously approved, but would it be okay if we did it again just to make sure?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
good idea.
So parent participants, Rick Mills, Katie Everest, Kiera King, and Kelly as our liaison.
Kyra, K-Y-R.
Kiera
King?
Yep.
Great. So Rick Mills, Katie Everest, and Kira, 2 former school board members,
Yes.
I believe. Excellent. And Kira King are the BUHS parent nominees. I believe we did do some or all of them before, but we'll just double down on these nominees. So Kelly, would you nominate them since your mic is open? Or it was, sorry.
So I nominate the people that have been listed.
Great. Rick Mills, Katie Everest, and Kira King. And could I have a second, please?
Second.
Thank you, Jackie. So we have Rick Mills, Katie Everest, and Kira King nominated to as parent representatives, community representatives on the BUHS Leadership Council. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, they are formally included.
Great. So moving on to staff, I believe we had already nominated 1 staff member, but let's go through the whole slate again as we did for parents. The staff members of the Leadership Council, Dan Braden, Ricky Davidson, Jenny McKay, and Tyler Boone.
I don't think we have to approve them.
Okay, great. And then students, I don't think you have to approve these either, but I want to give you their names.
Yeah, great.
Megan Clark, Hannah Lane, Bridget Schneider, Elias Gradinger, and Sarah Butterfield.
Could you do those again slowly for Wendy and Megan Clark?
Megan Clark, and that's M-E-G-H-A-N.
Thank you.
Megan Clark, Hannah with an H on both ends, Lane, L-A-N-E. Bridget Schneider, S-C-H-N-I-E-D-E-R.
Okay.
Elias Gradinger, G-R-A-D-I-N-G-E-R. And last, Sarah with an H on the end, Butterfield.
Great, thank you.
So much of our meeting was procedural. They elected Ricky Davidson as the Leadership Council Chair, Katie Everest as the Leadership Council Clerk. They agreed that they would use Robert's Rules of Orders as needed for formal meetings. There was an emphasis on having respectful dialogue and appropriate airtime as modeled by existing leadership councils. Each council member introduced themselves and their role. And for new business, we spent a lot of time talking about reopening school next year. We spent a lot of time reviewing the needs of the school, both budgetary and curricular and social and emotional. We have begun the process of creating 3 surveys, 1 for teachers, 1 for students, 1 for parents. Chairperson Davidson has created a Google Doc, and people are posting potential questions to that. They're going to review those questions, and then we're going to work on creating the survey. At that meeting, we did not have student representation, so they asked me to redouble my efforts in that regard, and so I met with student council, and we actually were able to get a robust student participation. Our next meeting is Wednesday the 10th at 3:30. And then we're meeting again on the 23rd at 8:30 a.m. Both of those meetings will be via Zoom. And I gotta be honest, it was great. A good group of people, really excited about making sure that we reopen well next year and that we do it with kids at the center of our work.
Great, thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Steve.
Any questions? Are there any other councils that met in the last 2 weeks? Seeing none. Well, terrific. This is a nice, robust report. Well, this is going to be a bigger and bigger part of our work, I can see. And it's nice to hear the reports reflect the perspective that Sean has shared a bunch of times about how meaningful and rewarding the conversations are and how valuable they are. So this is terrific to hear. So anything else on leadership councils? Any comments or thoughts or questions? Wendy, need some information?
No, I wanted to mention, and I hope this is the appropriate time, because you're talking about getting the word out about the upcoming vote. So I am on the volunteer staff for Brattleboro Community Radio, WVEW, and I record a lot of public service announcements from my home. So if you have some language, if you have a public service announcement you want us to put on the air, I'm willing to either take your script or work with you on one, and I'll record it and we'll get it on the air.
Great. I will send that information to Jamie, who's head of the Communications Council, and we'll get you on their list of contacts and take advantage of all your offers. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah.
I have administrative reports and financial stability. Well, we do have, I think, a brief administrative report or two. I haven't talked to Frank, so I don't know if there's anything more than what we talked about with Emilie in terms of financial stability, but I guess we'll find out. So Lyle, anything unusual or extra specific to report?
No, it was actually a pretty short report that I sent to you.
Yes.
You know, still making sure that people know that we are looking at end of year celebrations and graduations, and obviously we're following what the Department of Health and the governors has set for guidelines, which unfortunately means no person-to-person ceremonies. So I know there are a lot of very disappointed parents, and if it could be different, it would be different. But at this point, that's where we are. Nurses and principals, many principals have been sitting in on statewide meetings with health professionals. And this past week, it was really a very interesting speaker from Switzerland talking about how they had reopened their schools. And I don't know if those are recorded or not, but that was something that if you're interested.
The slideshow is available and you can read through it. It's amazing because their calendar is almost exactly the same as ours in terms of when they decided to close and get out of the way. That was really interesting.
Yes,
they're meeting again tomorrow, I think, with some of the lobbyists to try and get an update.
Yeah, I think it's usually a 9:30 Thursday is their regular time. So. And just so you know, all the voting information, how to request an absentee ballot, numbers of town clerks that information is going home in the lunch bags tomorrow. And then the postcards that will be sent out with the same information are at the printers, and the printer actually is the person that mails them. So they will be going out next week. And we have one new hire, BAM's English teacher, Nicholas Ulades. Keith, I hope I'm saying that right. Nicholas has been with us for over a year and a half as a long-term sub, and now he'll be a permanent teacher, and we're looking forward to welcoming Nicholas. So I would ask that you approve Nicholas.
Do we have a motion to approve the Nicholas Ulades, is it?
It's Ulades. I think it's pronounced Ulades.
Ulades, thank you, Keith.
So moved.
Nicholas, thank you, Liz. Second, please.
Second.
Jackie, thank you very much. Moved and seconded to approve Nick Ulades for position at the middle school. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, motion is passed.
Does anybody need help spelling his name?
I bet you Wendy does. Wendy can certainly do it.
It's Y-I-A L-I-A-D-E-S. I had to think about it. Yaya Laya.
Yeah, Elias. Well, we're going to
Sorry,
have to
just one
invite
more
him
time. I
into.
thought I was typing, but I wasn't. Y-I-A.
Liades.
Okay.
Having lived all these years with a name that's isn't pronounced the way it's spelled, well, at least not clearly. We're going to make sure we invite Nicholas in to talk about his name and share some funny
Heritage,
stories.
right. And I think that's it for admin report for
Great,
this week.
thank you.
Mhm.
Frank, you have some information for us?
Just a quick update. So we've already spoken about in previous meetings. Just a reminder, I am working on the audit RFP for the fiscal year end. So you'll see results of that when we get responses. The borrowing resolution, just a reminder that should be on next meeting's agenda. And that's just the standard borrowing in anticipation of taxes, given that we have spending in July and August, but tax receipts don't usually come in until September and so on. And then I also mentioned typically this time of year, we have the board approve the food service contract renewal. And as you heard the topic earlier, a lot of assumptions there that are not clear. So the state has given us more time to try to understand, what revenue looks like. So that will be coming, but we need more clarity from the legislature before we can bring that to the board.
Thank you. Great, thank you. Okay, any questions? Yes, Jackie.
Frank, just wondering if Cafe Services does a presentation about that, or if they're able to during this time?
They certainly do make a analysis of the current year. They take the feedback from the wellness committee and the administrators, regarding the quality of the program and so on. And then they provide a update to the per meal and per breakfast, proposal for cost. It's not a full bid process. That occurs every 5 years. And that we are in the second year now. This will be the second year of a 5-year full bid analysis. So they typically wouldn't make a presentation to the board, but we certainly can provide an overview of the assumptions and answer any questions if you have them.
Thank you.
Sure.
Anything else? Any other questions or administrative information? Okay, we will move on to unfinished business, which is really our primary business tonight, which is to talk about next steps in the budget vote process. And I had a couple of things I wanted to do. One is to just kind of brainstorm the range of things that we could be doing. We've already heard some ideas from the leadership councils and from Wendy. And but before that, Lyle and Andy have been talking and sort of sharing some thoughts. And I wanted to ask them to kind of lay out a little bit of the conversation they've been having. Andy has, in all of his communications with us, he's talked about the importance of having a really clear and consistent message. And I think that's exactly what we want to try and do here. So I think if our goal is to get as many different ideas on the table as possible and then figure out how to get them done. But I think primarily to sort of focus in on a message that we're really is going to be the thing that we try to put across. But just before we do that, I just want to put the language up from the statute on the powers of school board, and this just takes a second, about communications. And this is, I think you should be able to see this. It's from 16 VSA 563. We looked at this whole thing a few weeks ago when we went over all of the powers of the school board. And this is section 23. And it talks about the district, at the expense of the district, we can prevent information materials to the electorate on any matter to be voted. So it is appropriate to present information on the budget vote. Such materials shall be limited to those that are reasonably designed to inform, educate, and explain to the electorate the board's position on the matter. And I think I read that as pretty broad. I mean, obviously we can't tell people you have to vote for this, or you're bad if you don't vote for this, or it's gonna, terrible things are gonna happen if you don't. But we certainly can talk about why we think it's important, what values we're promoting, why this budget, why this amount, why these particular items. These are all things that have already happened in this process. And this board this budget was developed in public. It was approved by the board. It's been fully vetted. The Brattleboro Town Meeting, Representative Town Meeting Finance Committee generously reviewed it and endorsed it in a report. And it's actually been in front of the public twice for public meetings in March. The last one was 2 days before we closed the schools. So the information is there. We know this. We know what's in this budget, and I think the important thing now is how do we get that out to the public. So I'm going to ask Andy and Lyle to sort of get us started here and tell us some of the things that are already in the works, and then we'll hear from the board and the interested public and the administrators as well in terms of ideas for going forward.
Great, thank you, David. I can start us off, Andy, and then how about if you jump in, and feel free anytime.
Yep.
So we've been meeting, Andy and I have been meeting. We've been meeting with Frank, the administrators, and I think it's important to know that we support the original budget. That's the budget that's going to the voters. As David just pointed out, it's been thoroughly vetted. We'd had multiple informational meetings, and thinking about the fact that our students will be, we hope, coming back to schools after having been out of school for such a long period of time, we need more than ever to have people understand that this is a budget that we support, and we're really, really hoping that we can get people to come out and vote, knowing that this is a budget that we support and feel like we need. We've talked about different ways to make sure that we're getting the message out. For instance, putting a specific tab on the homepage of the WSESU website, and people can go there, and all the past times that we have presented the budget, the informational meetings, the BCTV information video of the informational meeting. Christina Naylor did an amazingly great PowerPoint and presented that at one meeting, putting that on there. And then, of course, all the budget materials that Frank always prepares. So having a sort of a one-stop shopping place for people to go and get the information that they need. Andy, what else have we talked about?
We talked a little bit about having some level of a mechanism to notify parents that there is a vote coming up around the school budget, and having a level of awareness around the dates of the budget, how people are able to vote, that safety is still a priority, and so that absentee ballots are available, and that information is contained within those posts. When we talk about our messaging with the budget, we're incredibly fortunate to be within a community that's always supported the school budgets, that really reflects the understanding of the needs of our students going forward, that understand the advocacy that's necessary, that's demonstrated through a budget, and the support necessary for our students. We know that our leadership councils have heard from our school administrators and the distinct needs that they all understand that they're facing as the school year comes forward. And we really believe that this is a well-vetted budget, and that's something that we want to make sure that information is being shared within our community. And as I said before, we're incredibly fortunate that the community has always supported the budgets, and that it's a community that can take pride in the fact that it digs deep for its students and its most fragile members of our community.
I see Sean and Jackie have their hands up. Sean, go ahead, please. I'm going to try to unmute you, Sean. I'll see if I can unmute you.
Okay, there we go.
Good, thank you.
Sorry about that. Now it says mute. That's why I'm confused.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, I think that I heard somewhere that the ballots have to be available 15 days prior to the day of the voting, which would be June 16th. So I was just wondering, is that true? And is that on track with will the absentee ballots be available on the 16th? That was one thing. And the other thing is I did the deconstructing whiteness with Michaela today, and there were quite a number of people there. And so I made sure to mention at the end of the meeting that the importance of the vote on the 30th. So the Leadership Council in Guilford and the Deconstructing Whiteness group is well aware of it. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I can just respond to Sean's question. Yes, we are aware of the dates that the ballots need to be ready for absentee ballot. They've all been sent out to print and they've been duly warned, so they will be ready to go on the date that they need to be ready to go.
And I saw a sample. Ballot. Actually, I'm going to.
Yes.
One more thing. I've got. I went to the district website today, and if I can find it, there's here it is. This is already there. The warning articles, the sample ballot, which actually is a sample ballot. It's already published. The minutes from the vote. Well, you can see all of these things are here. The BCTV video of the public meeting isn't here, and Christina's PowerPoint isn't here. But basically, all the things we talked about are already here. So we're off to a good start there. Jackie, and then Liz.
I wanted to ask if there is a need for volunteers to do any sort of outreach as far as getting people to mail in their ballots. And I don't really know if that's a thing that is possible, but I do know that we have a lot of shareholders at the co-op who are not getting their discounts because they can't volunteer in the store. So they call me all the time and ask for volunteer opportunities that we might credit them their hours. So if there was an opportunity for that, I would be happy to know, because I could direct plenty of people your way. And then I also wanted to say, and I know Mark already mentioned, I'm sure that he's going to get the message out as far as the ballots and education about that. But just as a Green Street parent, we really rely on the weekly update that we get from Mark. And I don't know if the other schools are doing that. Maybe they are. But I just wanted to mention it. It goes pretty far in the Green Street community as far as information that we need to know and is very pertinent to us. So that is probably something that would translate well into every school as far as putting it into a weekly update, the importance of this and the dates and things of that nature. So thanks.
Yes. Yep. And actually, Mark volunteered to do some messaging for all the principals. He's got a really great way of words. So we've been using Mark as our sort of writer to get some things together for us all.
Great. Liz?
So we're not going to do anything like a live session, like Facebook Live, where people can ask questions. We're going to rely on everything from before.
No, we have to have another meeting. It has to be, I think, no more than 10 and no few. Lyle, you know the numbers.
Yes, yeah, it has to be within 10 days. So we have to do it sometime after June 20th. And I think probably, David, that's one of the things you were going to do this evening was set that informational meeting. Yeah. So likely it'll be sometime during the week of June 22nd. And it does have live. It'll have to be a Zoom meeting, but a chance for people in the community to ask questions about the budget for sure.
Right. I also, we had talked a little bit about having some facts on the frequently asked questions on the website, but also if you have if the answers aren't there, if you have another question, they could email it to me. I volunteer to do that. And then I can, if I know the answer, I can respond. And if not, I can forward it to the person that is most likely to be able to respond to it, so that we can be responding sort of in an ongoing way as well. And we'd also talked about the leadership, and some of the leadership councils have already started doing this, but specifically getting together and calling parents and reminding them, actually making 2 calls, one soon, just with the dates and the fact that they can get a mail-in ballot and just be done with it. And then a week or so before, calling people back and making sure that they voted or that they're gonna vote. Go ahead,
David,
Liz.
can you simultaneously do a Zoom and a Facebook Live? Because a lot of people won't come to a Zoom, but would go to a Facebook Live.
It's doable. I don't know about Facebook Live. YouTube, all the legislative Zoom meetings are on YouTube. We don't participate as a Zoom member. You log into the meeting and it's being broadcast on YouTube. We're going to look into that. That's on a list someplace. And the other thing is a webinar format was recommended as probably a better way to do that, where we're giving information out and there's a chat on the side that people can send questions to. So we're just still exploring that. We haven't had to do this before, as you know.
Thank you.
Right. Tim?
Tim, you need to unmute.
Tim, I'm going to try to unmute you, but I never seem to be able to do it.
Oh, there.
I did it.
Okay.
Great. Or
I
else
thought
you
I did it. Okay.
Good.
So several people have asked me what the status of the turf issue is and how that's going to affect the budget. How do you respond to that?
We're still waiting for a report. I think that came up, I'm not sure in what context, but Steve addressed that a while ago. I think there's one more meeting. Actually, Steve, if you want, you can update us. There's one more meeting, and then the committee has to meet and choose from their recommendations which one they want to recommend to the board.
But yeah, specifically, it's like if I vote for this budget, what's going into the turf? How much am I spending for the turf?
Well, nothing's been approved.
Yeah.
There is money in the budget as part of the capital planning for upgrading the fields, but nothing's been approved. Nothing's been spent.
Yeah.
Steve, do you want to address that?
Yes, we've met twice with Gale Associates, the committee. We have one more meeting planned. At that meeting, they're gonna, they're working off of, I think 4 or 5 different design plans right now, and they'll hone that down to one that they'll then present to the board. We were supposed to meet with them at the end of May, and they couldn't make it, so we have to reschedule that meeting. They were hoping that happens before the end of this month.
Yeah. I don't want to get too far off track, but we're going to have to look back on those minutes, because I believe that there were supposed to be three proposals, and then the committee was going to choose one to bring to the board. So, but we'll leave that for now. I don't want to get distracted on that. Thank you, Steve. Frank.
Yeah, just a quick response to Tim's question. There's 2 types of budgets, right? There's the operating budget, which is the one that's warned to be voted on June 30. That budget has no funding for a turf improvement, okay? And then there's the capital plan, and that's funded over a long-term period with reserves. And that, as David just said, that is the plan, the capital plan. It's published on, it's in the annual report. For folks that are interested in that discussion, I'm going to flip to page 23 in the annual report if you're looking at it. That's the one that has a reserve for some kind of an improvement that we've been talking about. But it's just really important to recognize the operating plan is what is warned and is subject to a vote, and that's what affects the school tax rate and so on. That does not have any funding for the turf project.
That helps a lot. Thank you, Frank.
Sure.
Yeah, thanks, Frank. I thought that there was, I thought there was money in there for that and for the Academy project. Good, that's good to know.
Well, David, you're correct, David, in that the capital plan has line items for those projects, but you're correct there. But that funding is already in place. There is no new appropriation for the turf improvement. The Academy project is similar in that there's a funding mechanism in there to get us, started, as we've discussed, with engineering and so on. But there is no bond vote passed or any full project funding. It's just the capital fund has, over $1 million in it, and it's ready to begin those projects once they're defined. But as you've said, David, they're not defined yet. So the money has already been raised in terms of the initial scope of the project. But once the project is approved by the board, then we'll decide, do we need, more funding or whatever. But the operating budget that funds, salaries and benefits for teachers to run programs, that's what we're voting on June 30th. And there is no funding for the turf field in the operating budget.
Thank you. Other thoughts on the getting the vote out and steps that we can take to inform people and make sure that our supporters get to the polls? Andy, did you?
No other, I think we've covered most of it. I think we would just encourage volunteers to, as has been suggested by Jackie, if there are volunteers and phone calls, just to make people aware of the vote, and just remind them, what the date of the vote is and the different options they have at their disposal to vote on the budget.
Mark had mentioned recording a statement, and I had been thinking about maybe for a group of principals to record a Zoom session where they talk about what they're doing in the schools, how the differences among the schools, why it's important for the community, just whatever things they would want to say to help inform the public, and also for staff members and maybe even a group of students to do that. And we could post those Zooms on the website, but also get them out to the school Facebook pages, and there's a Brattleboro parents page, there's a Brattleboro town page where they post those things. There are lots of opportunities if we wanted to generate some of those sort of those audio video programs.
I think that's a great idea, David. I can pursue that with the principals.
Great. And
they all have really very specific reasons why we need to pass this budget.
Mm-hmm. So. Great. Tim?
Is the communications committee going to draft articles for the Commons and the Reformer?
I don't, at this point, I don't believe so. We haven't really talked about those. I think probably, again, we haven't talked about the media. They've received, I think they received whatever was on the postcard, and there was a page that I mentioned earlier that came from the West Brattleboro Association that had all the dates and explanation of what was going on and all the phone numbers for the town clerks and things like that, that went out to all of the media and all of things like the Front Page Forum and just a whole range of contacts that we have on the Communications Council has in a spreadsheet. As far as drafting articles and things, I think we're going to have to contact the Commons and the radio stations and the Reformer and have them come talk to us, and get the information out that way. But we haven't really talked about that. The Communications Committee is somewhat understaffed, and it's a slower process for drafting things. So as things come along, we'll try and figure out how to do that. But I think that most of this is probably going to come through the through central office, through the administration. except for the phone calls from the communications or the leadership councils. Yep. Any other comments or questions? I'm just looking over updates. I think the only other thing I think is to get, again, just sort of reiterate, if I can find it here, the sort of central message that that we want to get out, which is that we really don't know what's coming. There are a lot of unknown challenges coming, and we really need flexibility and we need support. And these communities have been supported for all these years, and we're hoping that they will be again as we face the new challenges for educating kids and keeping them safe. So if we sort of keep on that theme of being appreciative of the community's support, and that things are changing and we really need flexibility, and we need their support, especially at this time. So I think the only other thing is to set a date for the information meeting. And 10 days is the 30th is a Tuesday. So the 23rd would be a Tuesday as well. So do we want to do it? We have, I think, typically done them on Tuesdays. Do we want to do that again?
It certainly falls in the correct range, so.
Well, do we need a motion to schedule that?
What time are you thinking, David?
Probably 6 o'clock. That's typically when we've done them in the past. Regular meeting time. The other, if we record it, if it's a Zoom session and we record it, then we can rebroadcast, or BCTV can record it, and we can share it over and over again once we do it. But that would be an opportunity for people to be able to question directly. And again, we haven't really figured out, we talked, I think, about, as I said before, about a webinar format where people can write in the questions, but we may have to be available for people to ask their questions in person. So we have to sort that out. Any other thoughts or questions? Well, could I have a motion then to warn a public information meeting on the FY21 WSESD budget for 6 p.m. on June 23rd. And the meeting will be held electronically.
So moved.
Thank you, Sean, or Thomas. Second?
Second.
Who was it?
It was me, Ann.
Oh, thank you, Ann. And I think I saw Sean had a question. Is it to the motion, Sean, or something separate?
I was going to make the motion. It's fine.
Oh, you put your hand up. Way to go. Thanks. So it's moved and seconded to warn a meeting, public information meeting for the FY21 budget for 6 p.m. June 23rd, meeting to be held electronically, remotely. All those in favor of motions, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes, and we've formally scheduled that meeting, and I'm sure Barb will get the warning out pretty quickly. We have one new business, and that's the board recorder contract. Lyle, do you have information about that for us?
I don't, but I think it would be easy as making the motion to re-up Wendy's contract for the following school year. Seems
Wendy,
like
would you like us to go in executive session so you can negotiate?
This caught me a little by surprise, even though Barb and I did briefly email about it. I honestly don't know. I've never been the subject of an executive session before. I would respectfully ask the board for guidance on this issue.
I only if you want us to change the amount you're currently being paid per meeting. And then we would go in to discuss your salary. If you're happy with what we're paying you now, then we can, we wouldn't need to do that. It's up to you.
I think I would like a brief discussion on it. Thank you, Lyle.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Great, then we will schedule that. Thank you. Okay, so any other, oh, Sean?
I was going to make the motion, but so I'll take my hand down.
Well, if, let's see. Is there any public comment? Oh, Frank, you also have something?
Yeah, I actually had a comment for Sean, but it wasn't specific to this. So should I not?
Oh, go
raise
ahead.
that?
Go ahead,
Yeah.
because we're kind of done.
Okay, and maybe it's of interest to others. Sean, you had emailed me earlier on warrant questions, and I didn't know if you realized that if you click on the chat, I've sent you the answers to your warrant questions, and if I don't know if that was relevant to anybody else about using the system, but just that's all I wanted to say. The little Zoom toolbox chat right there. So that's all. Thanks.
Great, thank you. And Emily?
So I had a question regarding communications. So if the whole board receives a communication, I would think we were going to talk about it, because I didn't see any responses going back and forth, and I understand that we already did communications at the beginning, but how does that work?
Well, typically, typically in the past, the communications generally are supposed to go through the chair, and the chair responds to the person. If members want to respond, you are certainly welcome to do that individually as well. But the formal process has generally been to have the chair be the spokesperson, but I'm happy to share that. Things that come directly to the superintendent generally are shared with us as well, and the superintendent generally responds. I think I honestly don't know what the answer is, because a couple of the things that came up we should talk about them, and they probably should go on the agenda, because one of them was about meeting in public again, because we can have members of meetings of 25 now. And I haven't had time to look to re-examine the health directives, but I recall that 25 is permissible but not advisable, and that if you don't have to meet in person, they still recommend that we not. And since we have a number of members and a number of public and a number of staff people who have would be wise not to come to a meeting of 25 people. So, but we should take that up. We should really address that together. I haven't had the experience, and it's not something that's come up many times. So I think we're just going to have to put it on the next agenda, and I'll have to check the statute and try to figure out and talk to former chairs and see how we're supposed to handle that. And Lyle, any insights?
I think we really need to follow, of course, guidelines. And while we may be allowed for 25, I think you've really stated it well, David, that it may not be safe for that. I don't know about a room in WSESU that's going to be big enough so that we can we could have 25 people and all be socially distanced. Anything that we've been doing with any of sort of gatherings, and I use that term loosely, we've had to ensure that everyone's temperature is taken, everybody is wearing masks, that we're socially distanced. There are some very specific guidelines that we would have to follow, and I think we really need to check in. We've been having our nursing department check in with the Department of Health before we've had, for instance, any drive up, like Steve, I think, reported last time that they had a session where they handed out caps and gowns and things like yearbooks, but they had to go to no, they didn't have to, but smartly, they went to the Vermont Department of Health to really make sure that anything we were doing was safe. So I would say yes, we maybe are allowed 25, but I'm not certain that it's what we want to do yet. And maybe David, you and I should check in with the Department of Health and see what they're saying.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. And Emily, thanks for mentioning that, because I was kind of stumbling around that because I really didn't. We'd had 4 or 5 on different topics, and the board hadn't had a chance to talk about them. And I knew that we could bring them up under things that aren't on the agenda, but then we can't talk about them. So, or we don't talk about them. So that really didn't make much sense, and I haven't had to try and figure that out yet. So I will.
So some of the other ones will be on the next agenda too then.
Yeah, I just wrote it down to make sure it is.
Perfect.
Thank you. And Tim, you had a question or a comment?
I just have a comment. Our schools and teachers encourage students to engage in civic, we encourage civic engagement and active participation in the democratic process. And with the latest crisis, the racial issues in this country, I think I'd like to go on the record to congratulate the over 200 students who exercised their right to assemble in a peaceful, mature, and orderly fashion in Brattleboro. I thought that demonstrated all the right values that we embrace.
Thank you.
I agree, Tim, but I want to make sure you know that it was not a school-sponsored event. And if anybody ends up getting sick and they trace it back to that, we are really happy to see our students do that, but we did not tell students they should or needed to be there.
No, of course.
That was self-choice on all those parts.
Yeah, of course, that was a concern too, that they do it in a safe, responsible, socially distanced way.
Great. Thank you, Tim. I have to comment on the improved quality of your connection this time. We can actually see you and hear you without pauses. It's kind of nice.
I've gone to my iPad.
Well, it's a good choice. So we didn't do the new business, and the last item is public comment on non-agenda items. We have 23, well, not county administrators, a dozen or more public parents and teachers and others here. Any comments or questions for the board, or any non-agenda items that people would like to address? We obviously can't make decisions or talk about them very extensively, but if people have things that information like come before us, now would be the time to raise your hand. And if you can't figure that out, then unmute yourself and say your name, please. Well, Anne, I wonder, since Sean has been trying to make a motion for the last little bit, I wonder if you would step aside and let Sean move to adjourn our meeting.
I defer to my esteemed colleague.
Great.
Before you adjourn, before you do,
yes.
I thought we were going to go into an executive session to discuss a contract.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't. The one, Wendy's, you mean?
Yeah. Do you want to do that tonight, or do you want to do that next meeting? It's up to you.
Well,
I'd like to get it started this week if we can.
Okay, then it's not going to be any secret what the contract is about.
Fine.
And I don't know if there's going to be a lot of premature public awareness, but I'm going to read it anyway. So I move that we.
David?
Yes.
I think Ruby McAdoo
Yeah.
had something she wanted to say.
Ruby, are you there? I saw you come into the meeting.
Yeah, sure. I'm here, and I don't know if you can hear me. I was having some technical difficulties and couldn't raise my hand. Sorry. I came in late, unfortunately. I'm sorry about that. And so I missed whatever reports were from the Leadership Council, and I'm sure that someone spoke on Putney. But I wanted to just chime in and make sure that the board was aware that we're meeting tomorrow, and we do plan on putting out a survey in some capacity, and are willing to kind of hear what the board wants, is thinking about how to involve the Leadership Council, and and Jamie couldn't be here, so she asked me to come. So sorry I was late.
Oh, and it was really good too. So I encourage you, as soon as it goes up on BCTV, they start around a half hour in, and I would, highlight of the meeting for sure.
Cool. Thank you. That's all.
Great, thank you. I move that we enter executive session under 1 VSA 313 to discuss contracts where the board has determined that premature general public knowledge would clearly place the school board or people involved at substantial disadvantage. Invited into the executive session are the superintendent and Wendy Levy. And do we need anyone else, Lyle? Do we need Frank?
Frank maybe would be good to have
and
him in
Frank
there.
Rucker as well, please.
Sorry, Frank. You know you want to go home.
Yep. Could I have a second, please?
Second.
Thank you, Liz. Moved and seconded, we enter executive session at 7:34. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay, I will stop. I will pause the recording and ask people to please, non-board members, to please leave at this time. And we'll wait a minute or so and then jump in.
David, did you make the motion to enter
I
executive?
did.
Okay.
Yes,
We just
I
wanted to-
pretty much always do.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Yep.
Obviously, I won't be writing this down, even though I'm in executive session.
Let's see, I got to put Rich in the waiting room. So we are back from executive session. The recording is started again. We're back from executive session at 8:05, having taken no action. Sean, would you like to see if you can make as good a motion as Ann does to take us home?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I would like to make a motion that we adjourn this meeting. Thank you very much.
May I have a second?
Second.
Well, I saw Thomas's hand go up, but I heard two voices, so we'll go with Thomas for the second. Moved and seconded that we adjourn. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Thank you. This is, we're right at 2 hours, which is sort of amazing. That's a new short one, new record for us. So see if we can stay in the habit. Great, thank you. Good work tonight.
Thank
Take
you,
care.
everyone.
Aye.
Bye, everyone.